shot towards the end zone. Touchdown! Trey Tucker! To the end zone it goes! Caught! Touchdown! Armand Benz!
Bearcat Blitz, thanks for choosing us on your podcast feed or YouTube video selection feed, wherever you're catching Bearcat Blitz. We appreciate the patronage. I'm Russ Eltman. He is Neil Meyer across the way there. We're getting into a news-filled Bearcat Blitz episode as we sit less than 2 weeks from the start of the 2024 Cincinnati Bearcats football regular season, kicking off against Towson. New starting quarterback has been reportedly named. No official word yet from the program on whether they've picked Brendan Sorsby or Brady Lichtenberg. We have news that the most obvious choice has been reportedly made internally from Matt Zenitz of 24/7 Sports. We'll dive into that. We'll get into a full preview after I tell you about Bet Online. It's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to college kicking off, Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor Pool for the upcoming season. And when the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today and use promo code BELIEVE to get in on the action. Bet Online. The game starts here. Once again, that's promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV. Get to a quick message from our sponsors, but first tell you what you have in store for today's show. Brendan Sorsby named the starter for Cincinnati Bearcats football this coming season. We'll get thoughts on the end of that quarterback battle between him and Brady Lichtenberg. Then on the other side of our break, we'll look at kind of the top strengths for Cincinnati's team entering the season and the top weakness coming out of fall camp. Get to a interesting ranking showing that the Bearcats once again are going to have to prove nationally that they belong with the rest of the Power Conference. 94th national ranking from The Athletic heading into the season. That is rough slot for Cincinnati. And we also have some news around the 2008 team and honorary game and honorary kind of recognition ceremony going on for them as they get ready to take on Pitt in just a little less than a month's time. And that's where they'll be honoring the team that obviously pulled off the first program win over the Pitt Panthers in very, very epic style with Tony Pike and company back in 2008. All that coming up on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, we have a quarterback that will be taking the reins for Cincinnati. I would think for everybody involved, hope for the entirety of the season. You want to see him play well enough to keep control of this job for the whole year, unlike Emory Jones was able to do last year. He couldn't hold off Brady Lichtenberg. But, Neil, I think Brendan Sorsby, just with what he's shown throughout camp, his skill set, his physical tools, and the trajectory he's on as a much younger player than Emory Jones was last year, I think Brendan Sorsby is the quarterback for the entire year in my eyes, unless he gets hurt, and could be the quarterback for 2 straight seasons if he plays well enough to hold on to that job and hold off a Samaj Jones or maybe other candidates for the job next year. Brendan Sorsby wins it, and I think it's well earned by Brendan Sorsby. He had a solid camp.
Yeah, absolutely. But as we make note of this, Russ, it has not been confirmed by anybody from the University of Cincinnati yet. Following
no statement yet from Scott Satterfield. He is maybe projected to speak to the media again on Thursday. So that is maybe the next time we'll hear from Satterfield and get an official quote from him on the battle ending.
But overall, this isn't a surprise for many who have been around throughout fall camp. I mean, Brendan Sorsby has had a great fall camp, and Russ, you and I saw it firsthand on the scrimmage last week. I mean, the first 2 drives, what Brendan Sorsby did for that offense. I mean, the first 2 drives, he led them down on touchdown drives. He's had a fantastic spring and even a fall. He's had a great fall camp, but overall, he's transformed his body. He's the kind of quarterback that Scott Satterfield and company like there at that position. However, this was a true quarterback battle for those who might think differently. But me personally, Russ, after being out at Camp Higher Ground for the last 2 weeks, I thought Brady Lichtenberg had the best fall camp of his young career, if you ask me. I mean, there were some balls that he really connected to Aaron Turner. The connection was there, but overall, you could see the growth from Brady Lichtenberg as well. But Brendan Sorsby just beat him out there. And I mean, we saw it in the scrimmage, but this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody to see Brendan Sorsby reported as the expected starter from 247's Matt Zenitz. So overall, it was a great fall camp. It was a great battle. I know Scott Satterfield told the media over the weekend that he was expecting to name a starter after watching the tape of the scrimmage. So overall, we're not 100% sure of when we'll hear from him this week, but we are sure we will hear from him to get a confirmation on who will be the starting quarterback for next week's home opener versus Towson.
It was going to take, Neil, like a gargantuan performance from Brady Lichtenberg to unseat Brendan Sorsby from that number one spot. You and I, it was less of a formality as last year's quarterback competition, just with what they brought in Emory Jones compared to how raw Brady Lichtenberg was going into that year. It was a little tighter coming into this one, but when you factor in the power conference experience at a much higher playing level that Brendan Sorsby showed last year compared to Brady Lichtenberg, you factor in the NIL factor, which I'm not exactly sure what Brady Lichtenberg's NIL is looking like, but I know for a fact it is not really close to what they are paying Brendan Sorsby and what it took to get Brendan Sorsby to not only buy in to the coaching staff at UC, but also he was getting suitors from all over the country. There's a massive NIL factor that plays into this as well.
And it's worth noting on that topic too, Russ, that USC did come in and offer Brendan Sorsby after committing to the University of Cincinnati. And for anybody who knows the NIL landscape, they know that USC has the NIL landscape out there. So can only imagine what USC potentially offered Brendan Sorsby after his commitment to Cincinnati.
And he gave a quote about that to Dan Horde on the Let's Rain podcast. People check that out. A couple weeks ago, he talked to Horde on the show, and he said he was already moved in. He was already committed to Cincinnati. He was already locked in, ready to go, ready to start spring classes when USC reached out. So it was too late in the process there. But like we just mentioned, that there was pedigree to bringing in Brendan Sorsby, and you would have had to overcome that pedigree if you were a Brady Lichtenberg or a Samaj Jones, who I don't know necessarily factored in very heavily to this quarterback competition. When you got to the nuts and bolts of the competition, the two guys getting the most reps with the top players in the offense were Brady Lichtenberg and Brendan Sorsby. And Brendan Sorsby, the projected starter going into the spring, going into the summer, going into the fall, is your starter reportedly, according to 24/7 Sports Matt Zenitz. We have not gotten that confirmed from the program just yet, but it seems like it's going to be Brendan Sorsby leading the Cincinnati Bearcats onto the field against Towson next Saturday. Take a quick break here and then get to some of the other news and notes, including some of our strengths and weaknesses that we're identifying from Cincinnati coming out of fall camp right here on Bearcat Blitz. Fall camp done, Neil, starting to kind of work into game week mode, the keys and kind of flow up and down roller coaster ride of the season starting for Cincinnati here in terms of practice schedules and all that stuff. When you think about the end of fall camp, we're starting to really finalize position hierarchies. We had the starting quarterback get reported this week, and it feels like, Neil, when we look at, start with a positive, top strengths exiting fall camp, it's that offensive line. It feels like the offensive line, they knocked the deal, stayed pretty healthy along that line throughout all of fall camp. We saw Luke Kanzer was dealing with I think it was some kind of hernia in the spring and was really healthy, good to go throughout fall camp. He looks primed and ready to make a big name for himself, especially when you think about his draft profile that he could elevate with strong play once again this season. And then, I mean, D'Artagnan Tinsley, you got who else? Philip Wilder showed very well along there. DeAndre Buford showed well. There were some guys nicked up a little bit in the coming off of the scrimmage, the second scrimmage that we saw in the offensive line room. No definitive updates on if those are going to be actually serious injuries. But overall, when you look at the kind of 5 to 7 deep along that offensive line hierarchy, it's ready to roll and it's ready to eat week 1 against Towson.
Yeah, Russ, and I think that's the biggest importance within the strengths of this team. Everybody knew the biggest strength returning heading into this 2024 season was Cincinnati was able to retain their whole offensive line, and an offensive line that was able to really hound in and become a top 5 rushing offense within the 2023 season. They averaged 217.5 yards per game there. So you get your whole offensive line to return. I think everybody knows that is your point of strength there on top of it for the offense. And I mean, you even talked about it. We didn't see much of Luke Kandra in the spring due to an injury. And it's worth noting that D'Artagnan Tinsley also suffered an injury, and he is back fully healthy. He participated through all of fall camp, and he has had one of his best off seasons as well. So overall, the offensive line is looking very strong. And I think that's the biggest strength of this offense. And we've even heard Scott Satterfield mention it multiple times, Russ, that they have 8 or 9 guys, maybe even double-digit guys that they feel comfortable going out there and seeing significant time. And anytime you have that kind of depth up front in the trenches, it's a great sign. It's a great sign. You can keep those guys fresh, allows the running game to get open. But overall, when you have a offensive line spearheaded by veteran returners in D'Artagnan Tinsley, Luke Kandra, Gavin Gerhardt, Philip Wilder, John Williams, who John Williams has had a fantastic camp as well, and he has really solidified that tackle spot. But overall,
like a stalwart on the blind side of Brendan Sorsby out there.
But overall, that offensive line is going to be the strength of this Cincinnati's offense. But then if you flip it over to the defensive side, me personally, Russ, I think everybody knows where the strength of the defense is right now, and that is the second level and beyond. That linebacker room on that defensive side of the ball between Jared Bartlett, who, guys, it's worth noting that Jared Bartlett has probably been the best defensive player on the field for Cincinnati this fall camp. And I mean, what they're going to be able to do with him, keep an eye out. He will be probably one of the key substantial players there for Cincinnati on the defensive side of the ball. And then you have returners in Jack Dingle, who is coming off a career best season. And he even said himself that he played nearly 700 snaps last season, and they didn't have much depth there at that linebacker room last season. And then you have true freshman Simeon Coleman. You have Jonathan Thompson. The depth at the linebacker position this year compared to last year is substantial as well. And anytime you have that depth there at that linebacker room that has all seen significant playing time is also great to have, especially a guy like Jared Bartlett who can do so much. You can bring him off the edge. You can get him uphill or downhill and attack the quarterback, do so much. You can drop him in coverage. He's a freak athlete, and he reminds a lot of people of the play styles of guys like Ivan Pace Jr. and what they were able to do, because we saw it so well in 2022 with Ivan Pace that they were able to really put him in the middle of the linebacker room there in the defense, and they were able to get him downhill and attack. They were able to bring him off the edge, find ways to get him to the quarterback, and they're able to do the same thing with Jared Bartlett. Jared Bartlett has so many tremendous talents, and his skill set is so unique that it should play a strength to what Tyson Veit and this defense is trying to do heading into the 2024 season.
Linebacker spot could take, I think, the biggest leap, and I believe have the biggest leap in floor compared to last season, Neil. When you think about the experience Jack Dingle got and getting all those snaps last year, going through a third consecutive defensive coordinator change and new defense. But I think he talked to us about it last week. It's a learning curve still to go through this change, but all of that downloaded data you had on the field last year, it has to help out in that sense. Jared Bartlett, a ton of experience coming from West Virginia. You just mentioned that. He's going to elevate, and I think he will give them a stronger floor, a higher floor than what Dorian Jones offered last year. And kind of the underlying storyline of camp has been the speed and the fanaticism and the frenetic play of Jake Galladay. He's another guy that could raise the floor of this linebacker room, and they need it, Neil. To me, this defense is going to live and die off of improving their run defense from last year. We know how good these teams in the Big 12 are at rushing the football. We know how much the run can exacerbate the issues in the passing game and exacerbate your downfield issues. I think this linebacker room has a chance to really shore up that running defense to the point where you can get from 111th nationally in average yards per game allowed to the 60s, the 70s. If you can get in that range and not put so much pressure on the back end of that defense to have to make tackles all over the field, it's going to be a big key. And I think it's a good note about the strength of this defense. I would agree. It's looking like that linebacker room to me. I would say that secondary has a chance to be a strength as well. Now they got to prove that to us, Neil. We saw what just based on what the secondary was like last year. It's hard for me to say that they can have a much stronger floor than just based off of the fall camp action. I got to see it against an opponent first, especially a power FBS opponent, at least when you get to the second and third weeks of the season against Pitt and Miami. We talk about that secondary, but I think I'm confident saying that the floor linebacker wise will be higher on this side. When we think about overall weaknesses, Neil, I just think there's one major weakness that as of this recording, there is no real definitive answer for, and that's the defensive tackle position, right up the gut. That nose tackle spot, it's a major problem without Dante Corleone. There's just no other way to slice it. He has not practiced fully with the team yet this year or this summer since undergoing the diagnosis of the blood clots. They're taking it slow, justifiably, but we're getting to that point, Neil, where I would be shocked if Dante Corleone plays against Towson without at least 3 days of practice, if not a full week. So sitting at Tuesday, recording this on Tuesday, August 20th, about 10 days away from the game against Towson. It's getting to the point where we're going to have to see him get on the field for some full reps at practice, or if they're not letting him get this kind of hitting done at practice, there's no way I would think they're going to let him go hit and play full go in a regular game without a full week of reps to lead up to it.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And I think that's the biggest thing too, Russ, with the health of Dante Corleone. Obviously, they are trying to do everything the right way and keep it as precautionary as possible. They don't want to rush him back, obviously, despite with the seriousness of the blood clots that he is dealing with. But the defensive tackle and the defensive line, Russ, that is obviously the biggest weakness right now. Obviously, with the status of Dante Corleone still uncertain for Towson, and then you lose Jalen Hunt for the season. But overall, that's the biggest question right now is what will that defensive line look like? Because obviously you're going to be relying on younger guys, and we have heard Scott Satterfield say that all fall camp that they're going to be relying on some of these freshmen, that some of these freshmen are going to play. Now it's going to be a question of the percentage of snaps and whatnot that they play, but the defensive line, Russ, obviously, if you're able to get Dante Corleone out there, that is probably the best news.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest weakness on the team goes to a relative wash if Dante's good to go for the whole season, you know?
Yeah, and that's going to be the biggest question is if Dante Corleone is good to go for the whole season, that defensive line takes a massive step forward. Obviously, Corleone has All-American status, but you pair him alongside with a potential Eric Phillips, a potential whoever else might be on the defensive edge, but
Varner, Rob Jackson, Kyrie Moiston.
Yeah. But the biggest thing right now is that defensive line has taken a massive hit throughout this fall camp with obviously Dante Corleone's status uncertain. Jalen Hunt's out for the season. Michael Coleman, who is the big transfer from Eastern Michigan. And Russ, you and I have seen him in person. Michael Coleman is a massive figure there on the defensive line, standing close to 6'5".
He was going to be their Daniel Greshik this year. He was going to be the hired gun, bring him in. He is the guy that we are bringing him in from the outside to lead our pass rush. Don't have that option anymore.
Yeah. So overall, that's the biggest weakness on the defensive side. But overall, it's going to be a huge question heading into Towson. Obviously, we'll have open media today on this Tuesday and later this week on Thursday to maybe get an update on what Dante Corleone is able to do heading into game week versus Towson. But overall, it's definitely something to monitor, especially with the season opener just 10 days away.
Oh, yeah. Neil and I are going to have eyes sharp on Dante to see what kind of action he's getting in during these open practices this week. And then you'd think maybe, Neil, they're just taking their time all the way. And they're thinking Dante Corleone's season starts against Pitt on September 8th or whatever. Maybe that's what they're thinking because we'll get to it next week when we fully preview Towson on Thursday before the game, but it should be a similar, even with or without Dante Corleone, it should be a similar scoreline, not necessarily 66 points like the UC put up last year, but 40s, 50s, winning by 25, 30 points should be exactly what fans expect out of the season opener. And it's essentially a tune-up game for this program. I wouldn't be saying that if Towson was a South Dakota State or something, but they're not. They went 5-7 last year in the FCS and the CAA. So maybe that is the thought process, Neil, of you just say, hey, we're going to take as much time as possible. We definitely don't need Dante until games 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and beyond. That could be the way they're approaching it. Or maybe we see him out there in full pads, ready to go, and he is practicing fully, knock on wood. That would be great to see this week at some point or very soon in the future. Quick couple things to wrap up here, Neil. This feels like you see that they're going to have to justifiably earn back their status of respect in the national hierarchy. 94th overall among the 134 FBS teams nationally, ranked by The Athletic this week. Neil, that's second worst among any power conference team. Vanderbilt is the only team ranked worse than UC at number 95. And I would imagine this will be, hopefully for Bearcats fans, the last time they are ranked in the 90s. Hopefully ever again in its ranking by The Athletic, but especially when you look at how soft the schedule is to start the season, unless things take a terrible turn like they did after September 2023, I don't see them getting back into the 90s very soon. But it's just a sign of how far this program has fallen in the eyes of national evaluators.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of things to put into consideration of why this team might be sitting in the 90s, Russ, and we have heard Scott Satterfield say it as well this offseason. This team has nearly 50 new faces from a season ago, so it's really hard to evaluate what this team could actually be when nobody's seen this team on tape or anything as of yet. So, I mean, yeah, you might be looking at tapes from 100 different games from a season ago with some of these players, but they have never seen what this Cincinnati team is looking like. So, obviously, they might be ranked 94th, but at the end of the season, they might be able to be finishing way higher than that. So overall, that just could be due to the circumstance of them having so many new faces compared to a season ago. Obviously, they really relied on the transfer portal and the high school ranks this season, but that is one thing to put in consideration when terms of seeing that 94th ranking in the Athletics' latest report. So it's going to be interesting to see. But they do know that this is not a precedent for them to be ranked this low in the preseason rankings. So obviously they're trying to get back to that national status as what they were a few years ago. So obviously that is the big goal heading into the upcoming season and foreseeable future.
Get out of the 90s and stay out of them for the rest of time. That would be preferable. I prefer to cover a good team, no doubt about it. I would prefer to cover wins. It's a lot more fun to talk about these sports, talk about these teams when they are winning than when they are losing. Although I do not ultimately have a heartfelt care about what happens. We want to see the people we cover do well. That's for sure. Saturday, September 7th, Neil, speaking of teams that did well and the people we cover doing well, the 2008 Cincinnati Bearcats coming back for an honorary ceremony, fitting opponent to do it against with Pitt back at Nippert Stadium in just a few weeks' time. They edged out Pitt for the league crown back in 2008 during the Big East season. It was their first BCS Bowl appearance when they went on to lose 20-7 in the Orange Bowl to Virginia Tech. Got our old Bearcat Blitz friend Dominic Goodman as part of this recognition, and it's going to be really, really cool to see them celebrate the 28-21 win over Pitt that helped UC win its first Big East title. This is a cool announcement. Excited to see all those guys at the stadium on September 8th. Yeah,
and it's a honor to have them back in the stadium, obviously for the first time that Pitt steps back into Nippert Stadium, especially since that game, Russ. So overall,
has it been since 08 that long? I guess it has. Yeah, they split conferences right after that.
Yep. So it's going to be an incredible day at Nippert Stadium on September 7th. And for people who remember the likes of who was on that 2008 team, you have the team featured 9 all-conference players and dozens of future NFL draft picks, including Marty Gilliard, 2024 Hall of Fame inductee, Tony Pike, Jason and Travis Kelce, Connor Barwin, Kevin Huber, D'Angelo Smith, John Hughes, Derek Wolfe, and Mike Mickens, among several other stars. So overall, it's going to be a great day to see that 2008 team recognized for their accomplishments yet again here at Nippert Stadium, just almost 15 years later, Russ. So it's going to be really, really cool sight to see to have all those guys back in the NIP on September 7th.
Be there to tell you all about it as we continue into the season, just less than a little over a week away from football kicking off at Nippert Stadium against Towson. Very exciting times. Check out Neil's work at thefrontoffensenews.com. Just started their partnership with Rivals. Very exciting times for them. Check me out at Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. We have our first half prediction story up. The first 6 games of the season, I'll give you my thoughts on how Cincinnati will fare across all that action. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online.
6, Ritter to the end zone, looking for Pierce. Did he hang on? Yes. Touchdown. Lead the back as I've been around. Here he goes again. Busts free. Jerome Ford down the sideline. Foot race. House call. Touchdown. 79 yards.